I thought I'd start off, so as I often like to do, just doing a little like research, just what is sort of some information about fathers and kids. And here's what I found out. There's a recent study about affection, fathers and affection. And I thought that was so interesting. It's by Riley Marshall at the Southern Illinois University and her colleagues. And they suggest that fathers play a unique role in nurturing their children's positive self-regard as adults. And this was a study of twins, and both fraternal and identical twins' memories of their parents' affection had memories of their parents' affection more than they did actually their discipline and generosity. But that these memories of parental affection were related to their later self-esteem. But it was the affection of dads in particular that made the difference. And this was a sample of Caucasian adults. They found that the identical twins in the pairs who felt greater affection from their father tended to have higher self-esteem. And fathers can sometimes obviously have different kinds of primary interactions with their kids, like more play compared to caregiving, and that their affection can meaningfully impact their kids' attitudes about their self-worth. So I thought that was so interesting about the importance of affection for fathers with their kids. I'd love to hear from you if you have a partner who is a father with ADHD, or if your father himself had ADHD. And thank you, Annie, for posting that study. That's right, it's from the Greater Good. So I asked a couple of my father clients and friends, what are some of the top issues for you as fathers living with ADHD themselves and parenting? And the first thing that came up was patience. Patience with themselves and patience with their kids. We know that learning executive functioning skills takes practice, and more practice before sometimes seeing progress. Attention wandering and impulsivity can be frustrating for mothers and fathers alike. So what we want to do is lean into those 5 C's that I talk about so often and practice self-control so that you can be present. If you're frustrated, take a little break. We want you to be able to show up for your kids as much as possible, whether you're the mother or the father. And I'm actually looking right now for a little downloadable for y'all on the 5 C's and self-control, which you can use, which you can just go to my website and download immediately. So here we go. This is the 5 C's bonus handout. I'm going to put that in the chat so you can get a better sense of what self-control is. Sorry, I just want to. Okay, so let's see. Lynn says, my dad didn't really interact except to practically golf, baseball, hockey, or my fraternal twins' sporting activities. My dad had little patience. Mom moved the house. Interesting. Hi, Julie. Good afternoon. So that's really interesting. Thank you, Lynn. So some of us grew up in an era where fathers really not only didn't show affection, but they weren't overly involved in the day-to-day parenting. They were much more involved in the discipline. So I'm curious about how that was in your house. I want to go on to talk a little bit more about this, some other research. So, when we think of affection, it's not just the sound is muffled. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Can you hear me now? Hold on, the sound is muffled. Let me get my headphones on and see if that makes a difference. Background noise. Is that better? Hi, everybody. Is that better? If it is, let me know. Okay, so what we're talking about is fathers and parenting. And so the second thing that came up as a theme among fathers was time. Many fathers work all day. They're tired when they get home, just like mothers are. But it's important to make time available to hang out. That's what the consensus was around all the fathers I spoke to. That they may be tired at the end of the day, but your kids have looked forward to seeing you. They want to connect. So activities are great, shoot some hoops, walk the dog, whatever. But it's also great to just have some downtime to ask questions, cuddle, maybe watch a show together, have a snack. One of the families I work with, they really love Star Trek, and so they went through the original and then all of the update series, and the father and the son really like it, the mom not so much. So they watch that every day as something they do together. The other issue that came up was pace, about meeting kids where they are. And this is the whole kernel of my compassion and my 5 C's. Meet kids where they are. But what this father told me is like, my kids, he has 3 sons, 2 have ADHD, 1 has hyperactive, impulsive type, and 1 has inattentive. And it's challenging for him because he can be more of a very active kind of guy, but the inattentive child, it's harder for him. And so he has to really slow himself down and meet that child where he is. And so I think that we want to try to really observe and notice the natural pace where our kids are living. And even if it's an adjustment for you, to try to meet them at that place in increments that will really help them feel connected. Let's see what's happening a little in the chat. Lots of thank yous for me putting my headphones on. Honestly, I had my computer fixed, and ever since I did, the microphone has been terrible. So believe me, tomorrow I'm going back to the computer place. Okay, so Kirsten says, our kids are teens and hibernate a lot. So do they actually sleep a lot, or do they go into their room and avoid you? He takes it as a reason not to spend time with them. It's upsetting. So that's interesting, Kristen. So in a way, it sounds like your husband may feel hurt by the kids' choices to be by themselves instead of with him. And one of the things that we have to realize when kids are teenagers is that they do hibernate. They sort of are wrapped up in themselves. And so we want to meet them where they are. Ask them about aspects of their culture that matter. Invite them to come with you on some errands and do something that matters to them in the process. Get some ice cream, or, go to the GameStop store if they still have those. So to try to make efforts to have some time with them where you're doing something and you're hanging out also. It's hard. Maybe talk to your husband about learning, asking your sons to teach him how to play one of the games they like to play, or listen to some of the music. Maybe go to a concert of that music. We want to try to connect with kids in the areas where they're living, and we also want to recognize that they're experts on their own culture. Lynn says, my dad came home, had a beer, and then we had dinner, and he went to the shower to get ready for the next day. Then we'll come downstairs, read the paper, watch TV, and fall asleep at 11 p.m. and then off to bed. So he really wasn't, it sounds like, Lynn, very available. Kristen says he plays games, video games. Okay, that's great. Susan, it's great seeing my son help with car maintenance with his dad in the past. That's great. So, kids, what are teenagers interested in? Their freedom, learning new skills that are applicable to daily life. So let's try to, foster some kinds of activities between fathers and their children in those areas. The final topic that came up, which was really interesting, was focus. So I asked this person, one of the people I talked to, how do you manage your own ADHD? And he said, I focus on one thing at a time. My wife will start something, she won't finish it, she'll come back to it, but I focus on one thing and finish it. And that's how I got through medical school. And I think that's really interesting. If you're parenting kids with ADHD, if you yourself have ADHD, can you work with them and model how to focus on one thing until it's done and then move on to something else? Because we know parenting kids with ADHD can be overwhelming. So Can you share a tool that works for you, or talk about the tool that they've seen works for them that might help you? The idea of bonding and normalizing around having ADHD, if you as a parent have it, and if you as a parent don't, coming to the ADHD with curiosity. Can you set a plan where you're each working on some aspect of yourself that you'd like to see improved? You don't have to have ADHD to do this. You know, we all have our cutting edge, things that we want to learn and improve about ourselves. So to work on a challenge simultaneously normalizes that everybody has challenges and your child isn't atypical. So that can be very helpful. Shelley says, my 10-year-old son gets annoyed with his dad about everything. It makes it hard on me to watch. That sounds very difficult, Shelley, and I'm curious, what kinds of things does he get on his dad for? And are he and his dad alike? And do they share any interests? Joellen says, my husband and I are trying to figure out how to have the girls do what they're supposed to be doing, getting a summer job. Is there a way to get them to partner with us? Interesting. So I think the thing is, Joellen, you want your kids to have a summer job and have an activity. Do they want to have a summer job? You know, they may be just like, no, I just want to chill out all summer. And so it works better to kind of come together and say, look, you want to have some time to chill, that's great. But you also have to get a job. You like money, you like to buy things and do things, and you need some skills. It's really great on your college application or just for life experience. So I would work with them. I would partner with them on what they're looking for. Like, what would they like to have more of in their life? Because a lot of girls, particularly teens and boys, want money to do stuff. Cool. How are they going to get it? So I would sit down with them and talk about their goals for themselves, maybe reflect back what you hear, suggest something that would matter to you. Shannon, you would think that because my husband has ADHD, he would connect better with our son, but it's worse. He doesn't understand him at all. So Shannon, this is a great comment. Thank you. And it's a very important topic. You know, I think one of the challenges is, particularly for men, is they can see themselves in their kids, and what they see is what they don't like about themselves. And so they're not able to be patient. They're not able to connect because they want to try to fix this aspect of their child that they themselves are trying to fix about themselves or haven't been successful in adjusting. And so I think that one of the challenges is to have them connect without fixing for each of them, right? To do something where you're just doing something, no feedback. That would be a place to start. And I would start with something that your child likes to do. You know, it's always surprising to me when I meet adults and their kids want to play games with them, and the parents are like, oh, I hate playing games, I don't play games. I find that so interesting. You know, there's a lot of stuff about parenting I don't particularly care for. You know, stuff that I didn't want to do. And my kid played soccer for years and years. And I went to the soccer games and I drove to the soccer games. You know, I learned to support him in his soccer. It wasn't, you know, I didn't naturally have an affinity for that. But that was my job as his mom. And so I think we want to think about, like, what matters to our kids if there's a disconnect with a parent, and how to join them on that thing that matters to them. Lynn says, no one ever said my dad had ADD. However, as I grew older, I could see some signs of ADHD. Being social is exhausting, and it seemed it took him all day to read the paper. That's interesting. Tasha says, my daughter can focus on cleaning her room, but overdoes it by staying up way too late to complete it. She gets hyper-focused on the task, which affects the night-morning routine. Well, you know, obviously it's great that she wants to clean a room. The hyper-focus is clearly not assisting her. So what we want to do instead is help her basically break her task down into pieces so she can accomplish this before bed, or she can accomplish this and this, but leave that till tomorrow. That if she's done 2 out of 3, that might be enough. We want to try to help her set boundaries, because you can clean and clean and clean, and then you can't get off the hamster wheel. So I think it would help if we could break it down for her. You're welcome, Shannon. Background noise again, like a fan. Nope, no fan on. Sorry. Sound okay again right now. I think it's the connection. I don't think it's anything about me. I don't have a fan on. Cassandra, my 10-year-old does the same. She jumps right down his throat. Yeah, I mean, I've seen this before, where there's a child and a parent who both have ADHD, or a child prefers one parent to the other and is very critical of the other parent. And it's extremely hurtful to the other parent. And so, in those cases, it might help to do a little family counseling to just talk about the ways that both parties are feeling hurt on the disconnect. Because part of what happens is there's something that the father is doing that is particularly annoying or aggravating to the daughter. And it might be just because maybe she sees himself in him and doesn't like what she sees. So these are things that would lend themselves well to some family counseling. I wanted to share another piece of research, which is also in that article on the greater good, which is by a woman at the University of Cambridge. And what she found is that fathers spend a great deal of time in their physical play with children, touch and movement, like tickling, chasing, kind of rough and tumble activities like playful wrestling while smiling and laughing. And they also found that children who experienced greater father-child physical play, toy play, active play, like outside activities, games or balls, tended to have better self-regulation and social and emotional well-being. But there's a caveat from these studies that I think is really important for us to discuss, which is that children whose fathers were more intrusive during play, who got over-involved or over-controlling, or missed the cue that their child had reached a limit, tended to have poorer self-regulation as older children and adults. And this suggests that the play needs to be child-led, warm and lighthearted, to have a positive impact on a child's development. So we can understand that sometimes when a parent is kind of, they're goofing off and having fun, the parent may actually lose a sense of what's okay, as well as the child. So we want to really help our partners get a sense of when enough is enough. Okay, Shelley, my son is exactly like that. He favors mom. So I'm curious, and for those of you who are here, what kinds of affection did you receive from your fathers, if at all, and what a difference did that make to you? I'd also like to have you comment, if you're willing, on what sorts of ways your partners, who are male, are affectionate with your children. So take a minute and respond to one of those questions. What ways were your fathers affectionate with you, and how did that affect you, if they were or if they weren't? Or what kind of affection do you notice your partners are exhibiting with your children, and what impact that has on them? I can say that myself, my dad is a loving man, but he was not particularly playful. But he taught me how to throw a softball, and he would come to my games, and I knew he loved me because he told me. But he wasn't big on hugging, or he wouldn't come up and ruffle my hair or pat me on the back or just hug me. That wasn't his style. And I always wanted that. It was something I craved but wasn't able to get. Sam, I find any task incredibly hard to get started, as my head is always a muddle. My eldest is autistic, and I had the light bulb moment when supporting her that I am autistic too, and my youngest is about to be assessed for ADHD. I'm now recognizing a lot of ADHD traits in me too. I've always had the could try harder at school, but never could focus, and the information never went in. Well, Sam, first of all, what I want to say to you is bravo. bravo for that insight and personal recognition. It takes a lot to put that out there. And it takes a lot to notice that you have some traits that you see in your children, and that you can see ways that how you struggled as a kid, possibly repeating itself with your children right now. One of the things that I would imagine you'd like to do is to try to, defer any pain or complexity for them. And that's one of the hardest things about parenting. You really can't protect your child from experiences in life that are going to teach them things about themselves and how to be in the world. So I still don't see too many responses to my question. How and what way was your father affectionate with you? And how did that make a difference in your life? Kristen, my father's affectionate was quality time with us, school functions, park, celebrating Halloween, including us with his friends for softball and bowling. Wow. He showed me how to do a whole lot of things, and I love spending time with him. Fantastic. I merged two. I apologize. He always made a point to give verbal praise on grade accomplishments and teacher feedback. When I look back on my childhood, I see a highly active father, both emotionally and time-wise. And then you said he did not have ADHD. How lucky for you, Kristen, to have that. I'm so glad, because I'm sure that has really affected you as a parent, as well as just a general human being. Allison, my dad was the best. He would always give hugs, pull me to him, and put an arm around me. He has always been supportive. He showed me how to do a lot of things, and I love spending time with him. That's wonderful. Thank you, Allison. That's such a nice image that you and a summary of a relationship. I'm sure a lot of us would like to have dads like that. Lynn, my dad really had no affection. I think he was never taught. He was always gruff. I understand that. Michelle, my father was very affectionate, regularly said I love you, only disciplined by raising his voice. My paternal grandfather was physically abusive, and my dad made sure to break the cycle. Good for him. That's awesome. As an engineer, he worked 9 to 5, and my mom stayed home, so he paid extra curricular activities and showed up when he could while my mom took us to activities. That makes a lot of sense. And good for him for trying to break that intergenerational cycle, because I'm sure his father's father was also abusive. Shelley, my dad was a hugger and loving at times. He worked a lot and was very strict. Susan, I remember my dad reading the Sunday comics. Lynn, the most emotion I ever saw was cheering for sports teams. So that's really great. I think it's so wonderful to reminisce a little bit about who our fathers were and how much masculinity, the definition of masculinity, has changed now for many fathers. I'm curious, how are the fathers in your world different or similar to the way your fathers were? I mean, I see my husband's father was very affectionate with him, and my husband is very affectionate with my children and has been their whole lives. He was available. He coached and did a lot of activities with them, and that was something that was a little different from me. My dad didn't really. I don't remember him coaching, but I remember him teaching me to ride a bike and other sort of tasks like shoveling, and he would read the paper at night after work, and a lot of times he went back to work after he'd come home for dinner, and then he'd go back to work. And my dad worked really, really hard to provide for us, and he loved working. So that was, of course, very interesting for me. It wasn't until I got older where I felt like I was really able to start to ask him questions about his childhood and understand why he was the way he was. Thank you, Annie, for posting that. So I'm curious, what do you see in terms of masculinity? Because I think masculinity, the definition of masculinity, has changed, and so fathers are changing. In fact, I think Justin Balboni just wrote a book on, his experience of masculinity. But we're seeing all different kinds of definitions of what it means to be a man in society. And I think that can really that's a real shift from the kinds of definitions my generations of fathers grew up with, which was much more rigid. Then, yes, my husband was fantastic with the kids and always involved, starting with night feeds for both children. Right, so we're seeing a shift. There's been a huge shift in how to father and also in the concept of partnership parenting. Sam, my father was pretty much absent as a child because my parents split when I was 5. My mother was abusive, so I had to deal with a lot of childhood trauma. I'm so sorry to hear that. But thankfully, I'm nothing like her and more like my father, who, though absent for a long time, is warm and caring. I chose to cut my mom out a few years ago, which gave me the chance to heal. My husband is a great dad and dotes on our children. That's wonderful, Sam. I'm glad to hear that. Shannon says, my dad was not around, but I had my grandpa. Ooh, good point. We can talk about that. And he did things with me a lot and hugged me, which I love spending time with him. My husband always hugs my son before bed, and that's about it. But it's okay with my son because he doesn't really like to hug anyway. All right, that's great. Yes, you're making me think now, like about my mom's father. We called him Bobo, and he was much more affectionate, and he had a bazillion hobbies, and we each would have our private time. All the grandchildren would have special time with him on Saturdays, and he would take us to rock shows. We can be really like tumbling rocks or some kind of cool craft thing. And I was the oldest grandchild, so I kind of really benefited from being able to go on these outings with him. And he'd pull up in his Cadillac, because that was his era, and off we would go for lunch or to some adventure. Did anyone else have grandparents or grandfathers in particular with whom they had a special connection? My grandfather also loved theater. He directed community theater, and my grandmother would sometimes star in the shows. And I have a theater background, and I will never forget that when I was a senior in high school, I applied to college and I got in, and he took the words to one of the songs in My Fair Lady and rewrote them completely as a poem to me to celebrate my entrance to college. And that still makes me kind of a little emotional just to talk about it. It was one of the sweetest things. Michelle, I'm a single mom, so my child doesn't have a father-son relationship with his biological father and won't until he's at least 18. I'm sure there are really good reasons for that, and I admire you for being clear. Then only if he chooses to do so. All right. In the meantime, his interactions with his biological father are as a friend, so he has pictures with him as he grows up. Okay, great. The men in our village are the male role models for him, and I serve as mom and dad by choice in our home. He knows he's my $1 million miracle gift from God, ADHD or not. I love this, Michelle. Thank you. That is fantastic. I think that there are so many women who are raising fabulous sons on their own with help from the village. And that there's, that is just as important in many ways as having a biological father. Sometimes there can be a lot of, emphasis on, well, you need to have a father. And that's not necessarily true. What you need to have is loving parents of the same sex or different sexes. But people who value you and know that, just like you said, they feel like you're their $1 million gift from God. So thank you so much, Michelle, for saying that. So I'm curious, if you were struggling as a parent, let's say you are a parent, if you are a parent, and we reviewed some of these issues: patience, time, pace, and focus. Where do you think you might really, where you hit the mark? I'm great with my patience, but I'm not great with spending enough time, or I'm great with spending time, but it's hard for me to focus. Where do you think you struggle as a parent? Patience, time, pace, or focus? I'd also throw in there maybe affection. Are you able to be affectionate with your child, and in what way? Lynn says, I did, however, my mother would bad talk them, so we never got tight, though we weren't allowed. Now they're gone, and I crave and wish I had attachments. Thank you, Lynn. Sam, my granddad was amazing. He was quite a stern and controlled person on the outside, but he was loving and playful with us grandchildren. Such a wonderful role model and a true blessing to have had in my life. You know, for so many of us, grandparents were that charismatic adult that I've talked about before when we talk about resilience. You know, that person who believed in us, that person who we felt was always on our side. I felt that way about Babo's wife, Nanny. And, you know, she outlived him by many years, 20 years actually. She also believed in me, and we had a special relationship that was very different than what I had with my parents. And so those relationships with family elders or other community members really can make a difference for all children, and particularly children who are neurodiverse, who maybe don't feel so great about themselves, and having this support, this belief from another person in the community who you respect, or a devoted grandparent, really makes a difference. Shannon, you were the oldest also. Okay. Shannon, love that. Great. So I'm curious, again, I want to come back to which of these do you think you might do very well? Patience, time spent with kids, like amount of time, downtime, relaxed time, pace, can you meet your kids where they are, and focus, are you able to focus with them on one thing at a time, and affection, how would you rate your affection with your kids? So take a minute and think about that. Patience, time, pace, focus, affection. Lynn, sometimes I think my Hannah is more grown up than I am. She always got told I love you, which I didn't, and I really still wonder if I was a good parent. We have a great relationship, and she is helping and always wanting to know about my diagnosis. That is so fantastic. That's wonderful and so touching. I love that. Okay, anybody else want to say what some of your strengths are? Patience, time, pace, focus, or affection? Come on. Tell me what's happening. I'd love to hear that. Or, on the flip side, which of those is your challenge? And I'm going to put them here in the comments so you can really know what they are. Patience, time, pace, focus, and affection. So tell me a little bit about where you are with some of these. Shelley says, I struggle with patience and having the right words to help my son work through his struggles. You know, I think a lot of us really want to say just the right thing when our kids are having a hard time. And sometimes what can be very helpful is you see that we're having a really hard time. And I wish that I could wave a magic wand and make it better. But what I can tell you is I love and adore you and I believe in you. And sometimes that's really all we can do. So when your son is struggling, maybe come up with a plan of what you can say that helps him know that he can step back or do something different. Sam, my children are my world, and they know how loved they are. I find I am trying to balance everything and manage tasks the hardest, as I just don't have the executive functioning skills. I was the eldest too. Woo! Oh, I'm just put my hand up there for a general high five for oldest children. We could do a whole show on what it's like to be the eldest. We could also do another show on being the youngest, don't worry. But I do think that there are certain psychological challenges to being the oldest and the female. You know, I think one of the things about balancing is how the type of agenda we're setting for ourselves. You know, I constantly overestimate my capacity to do things, and I underestimate how long it's going to take me. And so that's something where we could easily, I would really suggest easily starting on to improve balance. And maybe actually, I think we could do a show on this, which is really estimating time and capacity and capability. And that's hard for a lot of women, particularly because we have so much that we're juggling, parenting, home, self-care, work, that managing the house, the kids. There's just a lot, and women are often the engines of the family, and so that can be challenging. Let's see, too many words. Okay. Michelle, I need to improve my pace, energy, endurance, especially when my son wants to play one-on-one basketball for hours. I'm laughing because I feel for you. He's gotten better with the tournament concept, so we can take breaks. That's great. My patience, affection, focus, and time are good, 75 to 98%. Fabulous. So, it's hard because your child is younger and they're supposed to have more energy than we are. So I love the idea of one-on-one and having a 30-minute tournament. And then maybe, a break, and then after dinner, another 30-minute tournament. Something like that where you can pace yourself and recuperate in between. Lynn, I love spending time with my children. Patience is my challenge. I'm giving and loving sometimes, but I say way too much. But that is me. Sometimes we all have our challenges. It's hard to learn when to say something and when to hold it inside. Edna says, I have patience and I am affectionate, but I struggle with focus and time. That's true for so many parents, particularly parents who have attention issues. It's hard to focus on one thing at a time when we've got 3 or 4 pots on the metaphoric stove and they're all boiling. But it is important to really try to prioritize and stick with 1, if maybe 2 things simultaneously. Really 1 at a time helps keep you sane, but that's just not always possible. Lisa, I struggle with time, which leads to struggles with patience. And I feel it seems from carrying the majority of the physical and emotional load, as hubby likes to just relax and can't see the things that need to be done. So that sounds kind of tough. What I might encourage you to do is to sit down with your hubby and make a list of what there is that needs to be done and say, okay, which thing on this list are you going to do and what's your time frame for doing it? One of my clients called these lists honey-do lists. Hey, honey, can you do this? But in this case, I think if your husband is not sort of getting this signal from the universe that he needs to participate, then sit down with him and be more specific. Susan, felt there was just so much when my kids were small, just keeping up with the basics, always ready with hugs. That's right. You want to just give those hugs. Lisa, I've got 4 kids, 2 infants, and 2 other ADHD. One of the infants is also likely ADHD. When hubby does help, he tends to get frustrated and anger easily. He's also ADHD. I think he needs a meds adjustment, but can't seem to handle that on his own, and I don't feel like I should have to be responsible for everything all the time. That is true. I agree. But if your husband having a med adjustment will help you, then perhaps making the appointment for him, even though it seems somewhat codependent, might actually serve you, and in this case, may be worth the effort. Shannon, patience is hard, sometimes hard for me because I'm with him 24/7. He has much more energy than I do, LOL, and I do show him a lot of affection. So I'm hearing that a lot of people struggle with patience and a lot of people struggle with focus and time. So this is really good information for me for setting up future ADHD attitude lives here on Facebook, and because it seems like those would be some great topics, like improving focus might be something that would be useful to people, as well as good old time management. Maybe even put them together because I think they're somewhat related, although not exclusively, because focus is more about sustained attention and being able to shut out distractions and really zoom in. And I like to think about focus as the spotlight of attention. So thank you all so much for joining. I'll take any more questions or comments where we've reached the end of our session. So if there's somebody who wants to add something quickly, please go ahead. Okay, I'm going to wait for a minute. I want to remind you that we will not be here for the next 2 Fridays, but we will be here the Friday after that. So continue to check your Facebook Live. You'll get some alerts. And I hope that you can all enjoy a little bit of the summer in the next coming weeks. Thank you so much for joining me, and happy rest of the day and happy weekend to you. Have a great weekend with your kids, and take some time for yourself as well.